Welcome. This video is called Don't Cram Lessons Too Full of Information. Straightforward enough, I suppose. So one of the biggest mistakes that inexperienced teachers make is being overly concerned with just filling the time. So they cram in too much information and they leave no space for processing of that information. And really, sometimes you see this behavior even in teachers who've been teaching for a long time or at very high levels of academia. In the beginning, it's a little scary as a teacher to purposefully leave extra time and space in a lesson. You might fear that you'll end up with dead silence and no way to fill the last 15 minutes of class and then chaos. But take it from us, the more you grow as a teacher, the more you'll realize that a little space in a lesson or lecture allows the concepts to breathe and take root in students' minds. And that's where the magic really happens. So for that reason, experienced teachers always purposefully leave extra unscheduled time or processing time during a lecture or lesson to allow space for discussion, stories, questions, some kind of meaningful interaction. These are often the most important moments of the lesson when ideas really connect in students' minds and really sink in. So soliciting questions, doing small activities, having discussion groups, asking for comments about a certain critical point, all of these will help students to absorb the information, and this should happen throughout the lecture, and there has to be space for that and time for that. Giving a lecture too full of information and no processing time, I always think of it as that's like cooking an amazing 5-course meal but not saving any time to eat it. Okay, so let's get down to some specifics about what to do with that extra space in your lectures. And really the spaces and breaks leave time both for processing of the information and also refreshing students' brains. And you can categorize these into short breaks and long breaks. So first, what is a short break? So it can be an image, a graphic, a short video, probably no more than 1 to 3 minutes, ideally, or a story told either by the teacher or by a student that volunteers, and the story should relate to the concept being discussed in class, of course. Short breaks should occur every 3 to 5 minutes. That's, it varies by class, but that's just a guideline. Short breaks also give students, as the name would imply, a short break from concentrating, which allows them to be refreshed. And then 4, it does refresh their brains so that they can refocus on what you're teaching next. Okay, so what's a long break? Long breaks occur, or should, every 20 to 30 minutes. It will get students speaking and physically moving. And this can last, a few minutes up to 10 minutes, let's say, just to give a sort of general guideline. It can involve posing a question to the entire class for open response. You can put students in discussion groups about some key topic. You can do a physical activity with the entire class, and we'll give you several examples of those in this or other videos. And really, the point is just to break up the pattern of the teacher speaking and the students quietly listening. Because, the human brain is stimulated to pay attention when it notices a change in its environment. And really, we all know that TV commercials exploit this mechanism by presenting a new visual scene every few seconds, especially on commercials, of course. And they're really just triggering a biophysical response mechanism, which is a reflex that prods your brain to notice and just perk up. But this mechanism is just a reflex. What truly refreshes the brain is to create and not just absorb. So in other words, students learn much more and can learn much more when they ask questions, speak, and interact rather than just listen to the teacher or just take notes. Our brain's capacity to retain information actually increases when it is in creative rather than receptive or passive mode. That's why it's critical to get students both talking and moving. Now, long breaks can actually comprise a huge range of activities. For instance, a long break could involve having students make a drawing related to the day's topic. They could give a persuasive argument. They could physically reenact a historical scene or a biological process. Just make it fun, related to the topic of the day. Make it active and make it interactive. One example is you could have the four corners of your room represent four potential answers to any question. Then just pose a question and they go to the corner that represents that. For instance, ask them when the Civil War happened, have them move to the corner that represents the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, based on what they think is the answer. Or students could move to one side of the room if they think that whales are mammals, or have them stand up if they believe that cyclones spin counterclockwise, or just have them raise their hand if they think that -2 is an integer. So many possible examples. Now, if mobility is an issue, students who can't get around as well as others, for easier physical logistics, students could just hold up they could just stand up, or if they can't stand up, they could just raise a hand, or they could even just raise one finger, two fingers, five fingers to represent their answer to a certain question. There are many, many options for how they could physically respond. Now, these exercises are so great because, number one, they get students thinking about the lesson, of course. Number two, they give students an idea of how their classmates are processing the lesson, which can sometimes be soothing in a way. And number three is by making them physically move, it helps to refresh them and reset their minds so that they'll be ready to refocus on another big chunk of your lesson or lecture. Okay, here's one more detailed example of a long break. You could have students pair up and tell each other one thing that they remember from the lesson so far. Then you have students write a summary of what they heard from their fellow student, from the other student. Next, have each student sort of think of a question that they have about the topic of the day. It's very good to get them in creative mode. Ask for volunteers to write their questions on the board or read them to the class and see if anyone can answer them. And then last, as the teacher, you can provide any answers that students couldn't give themselves to these questions. That's one example. Okay, so, and this is just, as most of these videos are, an introduction to these topics with a few examples, but there's a few more specifics on timing before we finish this video that I'd like to offer. In the beginning of your career, you may not be able to gauge how long it'll take to deliver a certain lesson or lecture as you've written it, and that's fine. If your lesson runs a little long, you can always finish the next day. In most cases, that's not really a big deal. If you end early, which is basically the greatest fear of all new teachers, don't worry. Just make sure that you have a few quality activities, games, or exercises in your back pocket that can fill slots of, say 10 to 20 minutes, and you know exactly how long they'll take. And actually, we offer some great back pocket exercises in the preparation and planning section videos, some excellent ones, so it'll be fine. In case that you do finish early, and sometimes you will, nothing makes you feel and look more like a pro than pulling out one of these back pocket exercises that perfectly fits into that time slot. And also, don't be afraid just to be honest and say, hey, we finished a bit early, so I have an exercise for us to do until it's time to go. Not a big deal. Okay, quick study guide for this video. True or false? Good teachers pack every moment of class with quality instruction. Sounds like a good thing to do, but after this video, hopefully you'll say no, false. The best teachers allow substantial chunks of time for questions, activities, and processing of the information. They know that each group of students is unique and they will have their own responses to the material. Their insights, questions, and connections deserve processing time and discussion time to help all students hook into the concepts and facts that you want them to learn. They need to make it fit into their worldview and connect it to what they already know. Your brain as the teacher, is so much more developed on these topics, so it's hard to imagine that they might be struggling to comprehend this information, the context, or the implications or applications of what's just been taught. So time to reflect, to journal, to discuss, to ask questions, to practice applying it, and share stories about the material is absolutely necessary for them to have a chance at understanding it on a meaningful level. Okay, so try this exercise. Choose a favorite lesson or lecture that you teach. Go through it to find natural moments where you can pause and give students a short break. Then create 2 short breaks and 1 long break that can be incorporated into your lesson. Plan exactly where and how you'll use them. Select the activities and refine your directions for it. Do you need to create a handout for a template to project in order to help them understand it? Design it thoughtfully and leave enough space for them to write or move about the room. And really, all that's left is to try it out in class and see how students respond. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for joining me.